This is your dad's favorite movie of the year.
Chris! Cyber! Where are you?
Come on the Scottish coast, Simu Liu, Woody Harrelson, Finn Cole is just three hard boys locked up to get. That's not how that was meant to come out. They're just three guys who get real close together so that they can get real deep. That's, no, but, you know, the ocean. Anyway, it's just the perfect film to really showcase how your dad's favorite movies are always those ones where it's guys on the ocean doing a really good job, something goes wrong, there's vague homoerotic things going on. You know, Last Breath stars Finn Cole as the luckiest or unluckiest man alive, depending on who you ask. He is a deep-sea diver who goes out in a three-man submarine crew under a boat to check oil lines or something. What they do isn't really important. The whole oil industry is one of the most hated things on Earth, and yet we managed to get films that are based on true stories around the oil industry, like Deepwater Horizon and this. And nobody really questions it, mostly because they make the characters seem vaguely less Republican than they probably are in real life. Anyway, something goes terribly wrong. Simu Liu and Woody Harrelson are forced to leave Finn on the bottom of the ocean. He's only got 10 minutes of oxygen left, and they have to figure out a way to save his life, with the ship just out of power, drifting further and further away from him. It's like, it is... This is a problem I've run into a couple of times with Hollywood true story films in the last few months. They are telling a lot of true stories that are very inspiring. They're very good stories. However, they're not necessarily that cinematic. I'm not saying this isn't cinematic, because it's on the bottom of the ocean and it's got all these really interesting thriller scenes. But there are difficulties involved in telling it and making it seem as inspiring as it is when you hear about it. And they've handled that reasonably well. But I just think those difficulties make it so that there wasn't necessarily a real masterpiece of a film in here. They've handled it well despite that, but it's just, there are just a few things. Like, for, example, the protagonist of the film does spend the majority of the runtime, I think, unconscious on the bottom of the ocean. Like, there's just difficulties in telling this as a story. Now, don't get me wrong, deep-sea divers, claustrophobia, the fear of that just terror, the idea of what they do for a living is just monstrous. It's a really special, unique sort of story. The problem is, it doesn't feel like that in cinematic terms, because it feels like he's in space. We've seen so many stories that are very similar thematically and cinematically to this, that are just somebody lost in space, or having an emergency in space. And instead of it feels almost jarring when they just show people on a boat trying to help them out, because you feel like it should be people in a control room at NASA that are trying to help them out. And that is a difficulty for it. I think they overcame that fairly well, but at the end of the day, yeah, the bottom of the sea is just black, like space, and it is hard to work with, but I think they do a good job with it. It's not a masterpiece, but also it was never trying to be that. It is a tight, tense 90-minute thriller based on a true story, an extraordinary true story, and it's got that to help it out somewhat. I feel like the ending is much stronger than it could have been, just because when you see what actually happened and hear a bit more about it, you're just like literal disbelief. There are also a few action scenes that suffer a little from being in deep water. It's such a scary idea, and I feel like it's perfect for a horror film. And this almost feels at times like a horror film, even though it's not, just because the nature of what they do. Just watching a day in their lives go well would be a horror film. But it's harder to make really thrilling and action-packed scenes, because there is one, I won't spoil it completely, but there is one scene near the conclusion of the film which is super tense and it's super exciting and the music is rising, but it's just a guy moving slowly through the water, and it's all really dark around him and a bit hard to see, and it's just not as cinematic as it should be. I think they did pretty well. I would watch it again. It's really tense. It is really tense the whole way through. It doesn't do a lot in terms of characterization. The writing isn't overly fantastic, and it's trying to just shove in a bunch of things and be like, all of these people on the boat, he did a good job and he did a good job, and that's fine, but it is a hard sell. I feel like just there's not a lot of conveniences working for them that make themselves into great scenes, so they had to really jerry-rig some together, and They did okay, but I'm giving, just when you thought it was safe to return to the bottom of the ocean deep sea trench, that never actually sounds safe, 3.5 stars. It's like I loved the idea of the film from when I first saw it was happening, without ever really thinking I would like totally love the film, you know? But I am glad to see that Simu Liu is getting more like action thriller roles. It was just in Shang-Chi and then just vanished. Why? Like, comment, and survive.